Hello, welcome. You're with Talk Solent, and of course you're watching That's Solent, and where else would you be? 3 great guests today, and we'll get round to Valentine's Day in a minute. But first of all, lollipop ladies. Now, the Southampton paper, The Echo, is covering big style this story because it is an interesting one indeed. They want to get rid of, the council do not want to pay for lollipop people. Lollipop people, is that what you call them, men and women? Persons, yes. But they do want the schools to pay, so it'll come off a different budget, I assume. But what might happen is there aren't any. What do we think?
Well, they provide such an important role, and curiously enough, they're one of the few people under the Road Traffic Act who've actually got the power to stop vehicles, stop traffic. You know, a police officer in uniform and a lollipop lady, and I think there's 1 or 2 other bomb disposal, you know, lollipop ladies and men. Yes, thank you. Yeah, they've actually got a statutory right. You have to stop. Yes. If a lollipop person puts their stop sign up, you have to. So they're just so necessary. They're mentioned in law because of the important role they do. They just have to carry on.
My humble opinion is it's an easy target for a local authority to sort of cut money. Because I attended a debate with Portsmouth City Council, and that was one of the items proffered as a saving source, was to revert the cost or to transfer the cost of these people, pedestrian crossing, school crossing people, back to the education authority. It just comes out another a public pot somewhere, and it takes it then off their slop chip. They haven't got to pay for that. So it was an easy, what I honestly believe, an easy target. I'd like somebody to turn around and say, what is the cost saving here? What is the true cost saving against a child's life or two?
Well, can I just say, before we point an arrow at Southampton, Portsmouth want to do the same.
That's right.
Eastleigh probably want to do the same. All of them, because it's all about saving money.
One's done one.
And in fact, Southampton have already approved £21 million worth of savings. So, is it? I have this feeling, I mean, I remember taking my son to school, you know how you're harassed, they're not doing what you want them to do, and you just for a split second, you might just lose your attention. Now, you shouldn't do, I know that, but lollipop people are there to make sure parents are really on the ball, and if they're not, then they're going to make sure that the children are safe.
And even more today with the amount of traffic on the road. I mean, when they were first sort of brought onto the scene, the density and propensity of traffic generally was far, far less. I mean, today, well, everywhere you go, there's a solid jam. And so I think it really and truthfully is they're picking at straws there. There are other areas the local authority can look at in what they call social support care, that they could do a little bit more with and not choose that easy target.
What I just can't understand is it's quite obvious that school crossing patrols are absolutely essential, have got to be retained. It's quite obvious. What I can never quite understand is why one governmental or local government body gets rid of that cost, and it goes then to another government body within the same county council region. So at the end of the day, total up the figures at the bottom of the spreadsheet, and they still come out to the
Passing
same.
the buck for no.
There's no end result that wins anyone.
Interesting question, Alex. Do we trust our councillors to make decisions that are right, or are they backing their leaders? Yeah, it's a bit like politicians, you know, politicians. They're frightened of the whips. I'm just wondering, if you were a councillor, would you be prepared to whistleblow, put your hand up, say enough's enough?
Well, wear a child's license. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think a lot are. Sorry.
No, after you.
I think speaking, the majority of councillors go forward. I know when I was elected, I felt a bit like a white knight in shining armour, and I was going to do everything for the ward I was elected for and everything else. And then all of a sudden an officer says, well, you can't do that, sir, or you can't do this, you've got to go this route. And then some political force says, well, it's not really within our remit to go that way. So then you've got an option. And years ago, the option was, okay, I'll be independent. And there was one in particular, Peter Ashley here in Portsmouth, who I served with, and he was a Purbrick Fort man. They got the Purbrick Fort. He was a rogue trader, but he could go to any committee and he would speak his mind without any whip or anything like that. I'm not always saying he got it done, but sometimes in politics it's good to have the free thinker and the one that stands by what is right, what they believe is right, what they see is right. You've got to have people elected from the populace to do that, and you just hope the ones you do elect are like that.
But it takes courage to put your hand up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It takes it. Have you got that sort of courage, you three?
I have.
You have.
Yes, I would. I think I would. I would. In the Hans Christian Andersen Tower, I would see the King and his all together. I would. I think, and I wouldn't be scared to mention it if the opportunity arose.
Well done. Yeah, because it does take courage. You risk being unpopular. Most of us don't want to be unpopular.
No.
Well, I think if you're in a position such as a councillor or politician MP, then you really there first and foremost for your constituents or the people within your ward. And I think you're duty bound to do what you believe is right by them first and foremost. And if you do fall out with the party line, the party whip, well, that is another issue. But I mean, I think of George Galloway. I'm not sure I always agree with all the things he does and says, but I think he's the sort of character
that... courage to say.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure, I'm very publicly. Well, I know for a fact some Fareham councillors are very miffed because they're not going to even be asked about the closing of their magistrates' court, which is happening. Now, of course, this is a central government decision, and lots of courts are going to be. And today, I think it was in the news, they're saying, oh, it's really... the future will be having courts in public buildings, universities, anywhere. I mean, have one here perhaps, when we've finished. What do you think about that?
Well, they're closed in Fareham, Chichester and Bournemouth.
Yeah.
I think we've still got Southampton and the Winchester.
Portsmouth, I think.
Is Portsmouth going?
They're keeping Portsmouth.
They're keeping Portsmouth. Southampton, there's one in Winchester.
Yeah.
So I suppose there is a low... It comes back down to this, they're trying to cut costs, try and make savings where they can. Do you need however many hundreds of courts when you've got one 30 miles down the road? I don't know. It's cutting costs, isn't it?
Equally, they're bringing in restorative justice to this area in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, which is seen as a cheaper way to administer justice and a fairer one for the victim. This is where the victim and the perpetrator get together and have a chat and so on and so on. And it all is solved, but of course much cheaper than going to court.
Well, yes. I mean, it's not solved, though, is it? I mean, there are, countless number of offences. I think you were, in fact, a magistrate. I was a special constable for very, very many years, and so we've sort of sat in the same room, but from a different seat, sort of thing.
Yeah.
There is a need for all levels of the administration of justice. There's the county courts, the magistrates' courts, and they need to be seen with due respect. They need to be in an appropriate building with appropriate signage, with people who look the part, because the administration of justice is a very important part of society.
How it looks, does that matter?
Presence is the word.
Yes.
You've got to have a presence. Any authority. See, the homogenous mass of people that exist in this country, the bulk of them, the line that sits between them and the ne'er-do-wells is the police and the courts. It's as simple as that. I remember the lecture I got when I first became a magistrate all these years ago. I'm not now, I hasten to add, because I'm too old. But and I remember this Irish judge saying, you sit between the bulk of the law-abiding citizens and those that tend to infringe upon the law, and you've got a right to defend that for them, and so therefore your presence must be seen to be, and it's the old saying. It's not. I used to sit in court and I was told this. It's not suffice to say that justice has been done. It's got to be seen to be done.
Yeah.
And in that terminology, the presence of the law is important. If you subcontract them down to a basement, like a little back office somewhere, then where is it the present for the ordinary law-abiding person in the street? They talk about the policeman disappearing. So
there are a lot of people young people particularly, who get into trouble for the first time. And is the money going to be made available to intervene and stop that in its tracks? That's the question.
Well, I suppose it depends what the offence is. If a person is a repeat offender being caught with a small amount of cannabis for personal use only, then, you know, to me they would need assistance from psychology or the health department rather than a fine. But there are people, of course. I mean, what do you do is with persistent shoplifters or drink and drive people, or particularly people who perhaps cause death by dangerous driving, and they need originally to go to a magistrate's court before being then sent up to Crown Court. So there's always going to be a place for the first step of the court process, and I do come back to, and I think your word is perfect, bearing. My father used to talk, because he was a regular police officer, about the bearing of the police. They have to be seen to have that. You know, you don't want scruffy police officers. You want, you know, people that look professional, and then you get confidence from them.
Should people be frightened of them?
No.
No.
No, never frightened of them.
No.
That was the. I mean, I was brought up in Milton, and there was a police station in at the end of the road, basically, and you respected them for what they were. They were upholding the law. That's what my mother said, and it was a respect.
Yeah.
And so you should. And I think that was manifest in the press today about that policeman that was prosecuted for putting his car across the road with those motorcyclists that were coming up and down. And he was prosecuted in the end, the policeman, for obstructing. One of the young lads who was driving the motorcycle has come out in the press today and said he thought it was totally wrong. The chap was doing his job as a policeman. And that illustrates the point. And to take that one step and answer it, the presence is important.
Okay. Well, we're going to stop there. Back in a minute, talk about visitors to the Isle of Wight, perhaps a nice romantic place for Valentine's Day. Ooh.